It was 1982 in Yuma, Arizona. My friend Rick and I were passing through Amarillo at sunset on the way to California from Chicago. On the second day, we were taking the 40 west over to the 8th south, then down to Yuma. It cuts through a great deal of empty land, inhospitable desert, but beautiful views. Though strangely, I felt nervous. Don't get me wrong, the sky was spectacular. The sunset a brilliant orange, red, pink across the wide open plain. But as the stars began to come out, all I could see was a solitary 2-lane highway going through the heart of nowhere. It was breathtaking. It was gorgeous. But something made me anxious about it. Maybe everyone gets anxious in desolation. I don't know. We were driving in the dark, unlighted, essentially abandoned Interstate 4. We had gas, we had food, but the wide open sky over the wide open desert made me feel so tiny. We were listening to tapes, so our music was good enough, but the driving was monotonous. We were trying to make it to Yuma and had left Phoenix about an hour and a half ago, traveling alongside Interstate 8. Then that was when I saw it. We had gotten lost, twisted around and on the highway, and apparently missed the off-ramp to Yuma. We wanted to stop there for gas and food and stretch our legs. So, as I fiddled with the map, Rick pulled off the shoulder off the road, and the car suddenly fell on the passenger side. "Uh-oh," I said. "Shoot, I hope you didn't ground us into the desert sand." Rick then pulled the car forward, still along the shoulder, so we knew we were okay. I gave Rick the map and got out. It was night now, that deep purple clear desert kind of night. I could see the twinkling light of Yuma in the distance, or at least that is what I think it was. Then Rick got out of the car, opened a can of Coke and said, "We'll get there all right." He was confident though, I not so much. I felt more like we might spend all of our gas looking for an exit. Rick walked a ways from the car, and then I hear him taking a leak. I looked back away from the car, in the opposite direction of where the twinkling lights of Yuma were. I looked back over the desperate loneliness of Interstate 8. No other cars. And beyond that, the stoic outline of the rock formations of the Sonoran Desert stretching out beneath the full moon on a mystic desert night. As I turned to head back to the car, my eyes caught sight of something unbelievable. I stopped and looked back. There it was, sitting on a nearby rock formation. Near the top was a clear outline of the profile of a gargoyle, just like on a Gothic church, you know, like the ones you see on the old churches in Europe. It was beautiful, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, that someone would carve that intricate beauty into the rock. And it's such a nondescript place. What a wonderful vision on a lonely highway in the deep desert in the middle of the night. I stood there nodding my head. I really loved that vision, until it spread its wings and flew up into the night. Everything immediately after that was a blur. I was screaming. I was running back to the car. I grabbed Rick, and Rick did not believe me. And then Rick saw it flying in circles under the moon and directly over the top of us. We got in the car, and Rick drove like a psychopath. Then we see something swoop just over the windshield. There was no mistaking the giant bat wings. "Did you see that?" I shouted. "I saw it," Rick answered. "It's a giant bat," I reassured him, and myself. "You think?" he reassured me, and I himself. "Yeah, that's what it was," I told him. Then something sideswiped us from the dark. The car went into a powerful slide and off into the sand. The car stopped. It turned off because it was still in gear. Rick started it up again, and the wheels were spinning. We got out to see what was going on. "Not too bad," I told Rick. "Okay, push, I'll drop it into gear." He quickly ordered, then jumped back into the car. We were rocking, then fortunately rolled back on the road. He idled the car in neutral and got the flashlight out of the glove box. Rick clicks it on and hands it to me. The car did not have air conditioning, so the windows were down. "Just keep it in hand if we see that thing again. Shine it," Rick told me. But before we can roll, a giant shadow drops down by the passenger window where I was sitting. My reflex was to immediately shine the flashlight I was holding at it. The flashlight fell on this yellow-eyed, leather-faced, boiling red, devil-horned gargoyle. "What the?" Rick shouted. All I did was scream, "Drive, drive, drive now!" We drove past Yuma, and we made it to Los Angeles. Something, to this day, still lives in that desert. The year is 1995, in Yuma, Arizona. I have seen some strange and disturbing things in my life. Some when I was serving in the military. Some when I was in the horrible neighborhood where I grew up. Some just because I was with a bad element somewhere. But the scariest thing I have ever seen was that night in the desert. A bunch of us had gone camping in the Arizona desert. It was a perfect night. We were loaded. We had a campfire. We were pumping the jams and just chilling out. I had been drinking like a fish and needed to drain the water tanks. I got up and walked north behind a rock formation and leaned up against it and started taking a piss. Just as I am about to finish, I see a glow over the hill. Not a big bright glow, like a UFO or something, but just an almost indiscernible orange flicker. I was about to walk over to the hill and see what was going on when Lawrence stumbled over to take a piss. He started blathering about Wendy, which is one of our friends that he was into. "Oh man, bro, she is so hot. I think she's gonna hang with us the whole entire weekend, dude." He started, "That gives me time to work my magic." I did not respond to his junk. Instead, I pointed out the glow still going on over the hill. "What is that, man?" I asked him. "What?" he asked me. I told him that something was glowing over there. I remember he stopped, looked, swigged his beer, and finished pissing. And then he said, "Oh yeah, let's go have a look." I told him and we started over. As we were walking over, he mumbles, "Probably just campfire. We're not the only campers out here." I told him probably. And then he whispered, "But we walked about, an hour? I thought Diane said this was private." And I answered quietly, I don't know." Then he started rambling about Wendy. "Damn, how am I supposed to get up with my girl if we got other people rolling up on us like we are in the mall, yo?" Then we got to the top of the knoll and looked down. There was no campfire. There was, however, something that looked like a fire glowing from a hole in the rocks going down into the earth. "What the hell?" Lawrence asked. "I have no idea," I told him. "Is that a volcano or something?" he said. "I don't know. I guess it could be," I responded. "Should we go look?" he asked. "Yeah, if it gets too hot, we'll ain't nothing but a thing," I reassured Lawrence. And as we started walking toward the glowing hole in the earth, Lawrence kept repeating "nothing but a thing" over and over. We started down the embankment and got maybe 30 feet from it when we started to see something coming out of it. "Maybe it's like Old Faithful, at Yellowstone," Lawrence started. "Every so often it's going to belch out some stuff," he finished. We both stood there, totally mesmerized. Something was coming up out of that hole. At first, it looked like 2 closed golf umbrellas were being pushed out of the hole. And then the umbrellas parted as they pushed farther from the constraints of the tunnel. Then we watched as these 2 horns, like upright ram horns, came out between the umbrellas that looked like they were opening up. Honestly, I think we thought it was some type of wildlife. Neither one of us said anything at first. We were just watching. I think we expected to see hooves in a cow body or something, maybe, Or some animals running away from a fire in a cave? I really don't know. I think when a person sees something that they do not make any sense, sometimes all they can do is watch until something clicks. And so we watched the head come out, a human face. This is followed by a long, reptile arms, claws, and fingers. It put its hands on the ground and pushed itself from the hole, and the umbrellas opened up. They were wings, shredded bat wings. No thanks. We took off running. Neither one of us even turned around until we got back to the campfire. We were acting a fool. We were screaming and gasping. Lawrence picked up a rock and shouted, "Let's go!" The car was probably a 45-minute walk away, and at first nobody even got up when we showed. I picked up a nearby rock also and stood by Lawrence. We were both hyperventilating. "Go back to the car? I'm not walking all the way back now. That's bull," our friend Darren barked. The girls were confused and stopped drinking their beers long enough to stare at us, then start giggling. "What's going on, you two?" Wendy had asked. "It's the devil. We saw the devil," Lawrence had blurted while backing up. "What?" Darren skeptically said as he got to his feet. "What the hell are you jerk-offs shitting about this time?" Then we heard something crunching in the dark, back from where we just were. Everyone got quiet. "What's going on?" Darren asked. "We saw this thing coming out of a hole," I started. "It's the devil. It came out of a hole in the ground. Straight out of the fire, straight out of hell," Lawrence interrupted. "Probably just saw a freaking Gila monster, you idiot," Darren whispered. "Let's go back to the car," Janine said, and then we hear another crunching sound. "Somebody out there, you better come out now," Darren shouted. "No, man, I'm telling you, you don't know, man," Lawrence pleaded. "That shit is the devil." We all stood there for a moment, just frozen like a group of mannequins in a department store display, waiting. That's when we heard the whooshing sound. Then the girls started gathering their stuff. Winnie picked up her jacket and the flashlight, and Janine grabbed the sleeping bag and the cooler. Then Darren began reaching for his pack when we were all shocked by this boulder dropping from out of the sky and smashing our campfire out. There were screams, gasps, and all that. Then the flashlights came on and Lawrence ran off into the dark, toward where he apparently thought the car was, while the ashes drifted to the ground. We could hear something swooping over us. The girls were navigating the flashlights around, trying to spot it. And then Janine's light fell on some red-black skin flash over the top of us. We took off running. We headed back toward the car. We eventually caught up to Lawrence. We were scared and gasping for air and treading sand. We started talking, which helped to calm us down. Darren tried to remain logical, which also helped, I think. He was telling us that it could be just some kind of big desert bat. Wendy said something about maybe it was protecting its babies or something. Then Darren started talking about animals being territorial. Then I saw Darren flinch. Something had hit him. I asked him if he was okay, and he told me, "Never mind, just keep going." Then something smacked Janine. She screamed and started brushing off her shoulders. We started jogging. Then I see something fall on Wendy in front of me, like sticks. She jumps and screams. And then Lawrence is screaming. Then I'm being pelted with something. The flashlight are being wheeled around, and then I hear, "Snakes!" Snakes were falling out of the night sky above us. I saw Darren pull back his leg and shine down the flashlight. I caught sight of this twisting pile of rattlers. I did not know if they were Mojave rattlers or sidewinders, and none of us stuck around to find out. We all just ran through the dark crying and waving our hands, jumping as we went. We finally get back to the car, and I was asking anyone if they were bit. Janine asked pathetically, "Is there a hospital nearby?" I had no idea if there was, but I knew if anyone had been bit by a Mojave and immediately ran for 15 minutes afterward, they would probably be dead in the next 10 minutes. But all I really knew was we had to get in the car and get the hell out of there. We stumbled down the slope together, where the cars was when we saw this thing, a big thing, drop from the sky on the other side of the car. We all stopped. The thing crawled up on top of the car and squatted there. It was a terrifying sight to behold. It opened its wings up and stood up. You could see its horns and wings. Lawrence started praying. He was calling to Jesus and asking for mercy. I remember I swallowed hard. The thing made a loud and long clicking sound and then flew off into the night sky. We made it to the car, and no one had been bitten, thankfully, and I never drove through the desert ever again. The year was 1992, south of Tucson, Arizona. I like to explore the caves around Tucson. I would usually go alone because I did not like whiners and hated being rushed. It's an acquired taste, I guess. I could spend the whole weekend just hiking and caving. It was a Friday in the hot summer. I took my ATV out and dropped it near the caves, right around sunset. And what a sunset it was, a gigantic orange ball across the baked desert. Classic. I took out my camera and began taking pictures of the massive orange circle. That was when I saw it. At first I thought it was an illusion. You know, a trick of light. It happens in the desert because the heat like that, with the heat waves in the air, you get these ripples or dimples that look like this or that. I rubbed my eyes and looked away and looked back, but it was still there. I saw these tremendous wings, like California condor-sized wings. They were flapping in huge swaths. I thought it was strange because it did not seem to move like a vulture or a large bird. Something was different about it. Then, as it got closer to me, I could make out peaks on the wings, like a bat has, and I thought, no, that can't be. I considered maybe it was some kind of genetically mutated fruit bat. The sun was not dipping behind the horizon yet, so the sky was getting darker, but still it was too bright for me to be staring very long into the sun without getting phased out. I looked away, then looked back, and sure enough, this thing was still there and getting closer, bigger. I lifted the camera and just began snapping pictures. I was hoping, even with the sunlight or twilight combination, I can get something on film. The sun continued to fade, but the bat started hovering in place. Then, as the last of the sun began to fade and twilight began to take over, the bat began lowering straight down in place. That was when I saw a body, like a human-shaped body, drop as it hovered to the desert floor. I watched while the light faded on this thing as it set down on the ground about 100 yards away. It stood for a moment, then appeared to close its wings and dive into the sand. Literally into the sand. As the last of the sunlight disappeared, the bat thing disappeared into the desert floor like a mole. I thought perhaps there had been a crevice there obscured by sand. Maybe it went to one of the bat caves there? I considered getting an ATV and rolling over there to get a picture of a world record bat, but I could not really be sure what I saw and did not know what I might stumble into. I started back down the rocks when I heard a shriek like a cat coming from the caves underneath. The sound was a wailing which got louder as I slowly pioneered my way down. After about 10 steps, I hear this screeching sound coming from the crevice directly underneath me. I could not have been more than 15 feet away. I did not know what it was, but it did not sound happy. I only had a knife with me and did not know what I may stumble upon. So I decided to wait. Basically, I planned to hide in place and wait for this thing to pass, or reveal itself at some point. I heard this rattling, clicking sound draw a few feet away from me in the gap there. I was scared. I waited. After about 5 minutes, I heard nothing anymore, so the light fell on this breathtaking lizard face. It had yellow eyes and horns like a big horned sheep. It snorted at me and then leaned forward like a snake. I ran. Then all of a sudden, I am flying through the air, and I must have went up about 10 to 20 feet and was dropped on the ground. I got up and ran right into a heavy cactus combo. I knew I was bleeding when I jumped on the ATV and tore out of there. and as I drove away, I passed that thing. It was already in front of me, looking down from atop the cave opening. I remained there, squatted with its wings folded behind it as I drove me. The year is 1989, South Tucson, Arizona. We were professional cave spelunkers, or whatever you call it, but we wanted to trip the caves in October. We heard they were beautiful and wanted to get some pictures. We went in the late afternoon and were told by the locals to be out before sundown. He said it's not safe after dark. A lot of nocturnal animals come out. And lastly, he warned us that because the caves were natural and nothing was fenced or maintained, don't be surprised if you come upon a snake or two. So before we went in, I was already getting nervous. I thought it would be relaxing, but there we were getting all warned and just feeling wary about everything. My friends laughed and told me to ignore the guy. My friend Roger had told me, he is saying that to feel important, let's go. And that was the end of that. It was late afternoon when we went into the caves, but after only a few feet, it got dark as night. Occasionally, after a twist of turn, we could see more light coming in from outside, lighting the way in front of us. We went deeper, and it got colder. I would have had them hold the flashlights as I took some totally awesome pictures of the cave walls. It was beautiful. We got as far down as we dared when we came to a rugged opening. We shined our lights in and could see it drop down and curved around. I think we could squeeze through, Aaron started. You guys want to try it? He finished. We thought about it. It looks like no one has been through here in ages. Probably priceless photos. You guys up for it? He asked. Again, we thought about it. Maybe we should. But I think it's getting dark outside. Maybe animals are going to start roaming around in here, Tracy worried. We pulled our flashlights away and pointed back to the path up, and that was when I noticed the light coming from down below the rugged crevice. Before the guys could turn their lights back on, I told them, "Hold it, hold it!" We stood there and looked down at a crack. We saw an orange light flicker down there. "What is that?" I asked. "Oh, that must be the sunset. Must be another," Roger attempted to clarify. All four of us squeezed together and peered down in the hole. And no sooner had we done that than we saw an unmistakable shape of webbed wings. They must have been at least 10 feet across. Then they blurred and swooped in front of the light. And then the light faded. "What the hell was that?" Aaron said. We got out of there. We did not stop for pictures. We did not chat. We just headed for the opening. I know I was more scared with every step. I could just feel something following us in the cave. And then we could hear something running up behind us. At first, it started in the far distance, but you could hear it getting closer. I could hear Aaron's voice shaking when he just told us, "Just keep going." We made it out of the cave and ran to the car, and we all stood there looking back and breathing. The local guy was gone, and no one was around. "I think that guy is just having some fun with us," Roger concluded. And then Aaron pointed back to where we had come. "Do you see that? I see yellow eyes. You see that?" Aaron asked. I saw it. We all began getting in the car. It was then that Aaron pointed his light back up there. Aaron and I saw something like a red alligator skin roll back into the dark. Maybe the local guy was pranking us, but it was a very good and very scary prank. I personally think that was organic life too, to some extent. Something lives in those caves in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. This happened to me in October of 1983 in Santa Cruz County, Arizona. I grew up in the desert. I know there are some who think the whole gargoyle stories are cute or even funny or stupid. But if you do some research, there is a reason that these statues are on ancient buildings and they are considered the devil's offspring. Gargoyles are evil. They are not animals. They are not human. They are something else. Something much worse. I saw the desert gargoyle in 1983 after a bunch of satanic worshippers were chased off the old Hanson Ranch in South Arizona. We went out that night to clean up the beer cans scattered all over the place and put out the campfire after the police had escorted them off the property. I already felt like something was watching me. I thought I saw something moving, and there it was in the big mesquite tree, staring down at me with the devil's yellow eyes. I ran screaming to my daddy, and he got a shotgun. That thing came into our house. My daddy shot him straight in the chest. The thing just laughed. The laugh of the devil. Then it smashed out our kitchen wall and flew away. The next night, Mitchell Rogers was found decapitated in his bed. The joke around town was it was suicide, and that's because the police were part of the occult too. Daddy boarded up the house and we moved to Roseville. I never forget that thing from that night. It was the devil's offspring, and it lives in the desert. Beware the Sonoran Desert. I will never go back there. Story 2. I love our gargoyle, Gargsy. He is nothing to fear. I have known about it since I was a kid. The old-timers used to tell stories about him. The reason he is able to exist is because those of us who live here have respect. But occasionally, there is a jackass, some loudmouth knucklehead who thinks the world revolves around him. But our gargoyle settles up with them soon enough, and they are gone. One way or the other. I'm happy to talk about it because, 1, I think it is possible to live in peace among all creatures. And to me, the gargoyle is no different from a rattlesnake. Just another animal. And, just like the rattler, step on it and you're in big trouble. But I never heard of the gargoyle hurting innocents. Oh, maybe he puts out a warning. But never hurt anybody as far as I know. And no one will believe me. So what's the harm? If you tell people about this thing, it actually ends up protecting the thing because nobody thinks it's real. And 3, nobody, least way, nowadays is interested in going into the no man's land, part of the Sonoran Desert where our friend lives, and seek him out. Maybe in 1,000 years, but I am sure the gargoyle will still be able to hide somewhere between there and his caves, or do whatever else he needs to in order to deal with it. He has been around a lot longer than us. And to answer your question, yes, I did see the gargoyle. In person. Only one time though. And it was a sight to behold. My wife and me live in the Sonoran, and I always hope to see it show up in our backyard. But the one and only time I ever saw it was on a drive through one of the national reservations in Papago, Arizona. We were going from Tucson to Gila Bend. My friend Benny and I were taking the long way home. We were on 86 between 3 points when Benny had to take a piss. Maybe somewhere around Cells on old Indian Route 15. He gets out to piss, I get out and walk around. And as anybody who knows that area will tell you, if you drive through there at night, the cactus look like people lining the desert. And surely enough, that night was no exception. Then, I see one of the cactus about 50 feet in front of me walking due west. Tremendous pointed wings and ram horns. "Benny," I said. "Hey, Ben, look over there." "I'll be goddamned," he said. I whispered to him, "She's a beauty, ain't she?" "A thing of beauty," he said. Benny zipped up. The gargoyle jumped up into the sky and was gone. That's it. The one and only time I ever saw our gargoyle. But I hope it's not the last. Story 3. A group of us were trying to cross the border from Mexico to California, but the guy who was taking us said he needed more money. What are you going to do when something like that happens? We were completely at the mercy of the Coyotes. The Coyote that was taking us to California supposedly had a good reputation. He could get you over the border, but also get you in the hands of some friendlies on the other side, and get you set up in a city in Arizona, or even California, and also get you set up with where the jobs were. That was why I paid 3,500 American dollars, and the others, I found out, paid similar amounts. It was a lot to pull together, but since this was after 9/11, the Coyote was much more involved in telling us things that have changed, and it was much together, and on this night, we had to adjust. We were going over the border in Arizona instead of California. The insurance the Coyote took out on each of us was our family. That is, none of us could pay the extra $1,000 he was demanding once we were out in the desert. So he reminded us the information he had about our families. I didn't really care where we went in, as long it was the Estados Unidos. Me and 3 others were standing in the night desert, while the Coyote went to talk to another guy who pulled in a big truck with lots of extra lights mounted on it. We could not hear what they were saying, but we could see them laughing. It felt sinister. His friend drove away. Then the Coyote came back and told us we have to leave now. He was an obnoxious, mean con artist of a man, and I hated him. We started walking forward in the dark. He was back there, behind us, singing and talking shit. The 4 of us began talking to one another. We were wondering how long the walk would be. Then we noticed that we have not heard the asshole in quite a while. We stopped. We called out. He was gone. Just gone. And there we were, stuck in the dark, abandoned in the desert at night, on the Mexican side of the border. We didn't know what to do. This Coyote made all these promises and threats, and bragged as long as he was with us. Then he abandoned us in the middle of nowhere? After calling and searching, we decided to band together and take a risk for the border. We walked and walked and walked. One of the guys with us started to cry. I don't blame him. It is hard when you are walking in the dark and have no idea where you are or how far you're going. But we kept walking. I am in the front and something falls right in front of me. The first thing I thought was Border Patrol, and I jumped. Then we all held still. I looked down. I saw something on the ground. The moon was out, so I could see something. I looked at it for a while. Then I approached it. Maybe some others are out here crossing, and I just threw something to get our attention, I thought. I got up closer and could see something written on the thing that had landed in front of me. It was the tattoo from our Coyote. It was on his shoulder, and that was his arm I was looking at. There was screaming and panic. The group of us took off running and hid in some bushes by the rocks. It could be a lot of things, and all of them bad. Debt, revenge, drugs, territory. And as we crouched behind the rocky bushes, we saw something skid into the sand near the arm. Then the dust cleared, and we could see it was a giant man with bat wings. It grabbed the arm, made a sound like a screeching bird, and flew off into the sky. None of us made a sound. Then we got up wide-eyed and confused, but continued going on in the direction we had started. Only now walking faster and always looking up with fear and searching the dim terrain for possible refugees in case they should appear. About an hour later, we ran into another group who were crossing and joined them. We all did make it across. I knew there were many dangerous animals in that desert, so I was really more worried about what may happen to my family if the Coyote never showed up or got his money. But no one in my family ever had a problem or heard from anybody. I guess they chalked it up to something else, or maybe thought he stole from them. So it was more on him the Coyote and his family. As for the crew, I never saw any of them again. We spread out once we got inside Arizona. I never went back to Mexico. I still send money back to my family, and none of my family ever had a problem from anyone. There was so much life and death going on that night. Even the monsters of myth had to take a back seat to other realities. But many times in the years since, I have thought about what I saw, what we saw, and I wonder if the others have ever told anyone about it. Story 4. I have heard about the Sonoran Gargoyle, but I do not believe in it. I'm sure it is just a giant bat, or bats. I used to watch the bats leaving their caves at night, south of Tucson. It is a cool thing, but it is also awe-inspiring when you see hundreds of thousands of bats flying into the setting sun like that. It can make your mind play tricks on you. One time in particular, me and my dad and my friend took a drive down to the bat caves around sunset, and then they start pouring out. There's the sound and the sky goes black. Yeah, it's wild. So it was on that one time we spotted on Lumpy Shadow climb out of the cave and started scaling up toward the knoll. You could really just make out the basic shape. And because those bats have smashed up snouts, it can kinda look like a human face, especially in the setting sun or even the dark. In our case, we were watching this thing climb. It is just a moving pile of wings and elbows. Then it squatted on the cliff and sat there. And seriously, it looked like a ram with wings, but with a human face. Because the sun hits the face on those bats, and it makes it look like it has a bow nose, like a human face. So when we were there watching it, jumped into the air and took off flying among the other bats. But its wings were just not fitting. The big bat's wings were taking wider swoops, slower, more powerful ones. And you could clearly make it out, even among the bat swarm. And when it was flying like that, I could see where a person might mistake the shape of a big bat for something else with legs, arms, or a tail. Just an illusion. But I can understand how someone can make that mistake. To me, the bigger issue is the fact that there are bats in the Sonoran Desert with wingspans bigger than condors. That is probably more dangerous than a gargoyle, right? Story 5. We like to go camping, and we were really into something called extreme vacations. An extreme vacation for us was to take on a challenge, face it, overcome it. Sometimes it was dangerous. Sometimes it was crazy, but we loved it. Sometimes it was also extremely stupid. That was the case when we took a weekend trip to Mexico. Our friend dropped us off at El Elegante Crater, with the intention of returning to pick us up at Destination Unknown when we would call him sometime later on that weekend. We got there early in the AM and had all of our high-tech gear, which gave us a false sense of security. And around 10 a.m., we left the crater and headed northwest. We were laughing, joking, drinking, and cavalierly passing multiple signs that warned Peligro. We decided we could actually hike north to the 2, just south of the Arizona border, and have him retrieve us near the Cabeza Perita National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah, we were beating our chests and felt like there was no terrain we could not handle with authority. Idiots. Nevertheless, somehow, and I am still not entirely sure how, our GPS went screwy. So we navigated by the sun for more than 2 hours, only to end up in a mess of craggy crevices where we needed to keep going left. Finally, we decided to commit to a short walk to the south in order to access what looked like a crescent plain that would take us back north. We had plenty of water and solid gear, but it was not long before we completely lost all phone signal. I distinctly remember 3 o'clock, because it was hotter than hell, and although we had a lot of sunblock, there was absolutely no shade. No immediate shade, I should say. No shade as far as I could see. I was not so extreme anymore, as it was just scary. And the more we walked, the more anxious we got. I could tell Jeff was getting nerved up. We had both stopped joking about 2 hours ago, and about an hour ago stopped talking altogether. Then we got into an argument. That is always a good idea in those situations. Jeff wanted to go straight north, but I could see only rough terrain north and wanted to go northeast, especially as I knew northeast was more likely to lead us back to people, or more likely toward Arizona. He told me, "We don't have time to fuck around," he snapped. I knew we had to keep it cool, because the desert is not the place to get hysterical. North is safer, we have to play it safe now, he articulated more calmly. Then we heard a rattle. Jeff jumped back just as I looked over, and I actually saw a large rattler striking at him, coming right off the ground with more than half of its body. It missed, but the rattle continued. We both started circling and heard more rattling. Then realized we were all surrounded by these snakes. We were standing in a dip between hills. The valley was dusty, dry, and filled with rattlers. I think that would qualify as a snake pit. Jeff got his pack off and immediately started using one of the aluminum strap poles to toss away the few snakes right around him. I did the same. "There are hundreds," Jeff said. Jeff looked up as we both considered how we could hike out of here. Even though we had flashlights with us, no one wants to navigate a snake pit in the dark, and especially in the short valley we had found ourselves. I distinctively remember that long afternoon shadow falling over the west ridge. It covered half of our options in growing darkness. That was nerve-wracking. I still have nightmares about that. What a horrible position to be in. Fortunately, we were able to draw closer to the north slope of the brush and cactus where the rattler invasion seemed to thin out. We took a breath. We could see better as portions of the flat rock exposed empty, safe swatches. So that is where we went, and just above the snake trap, we sat down on the stone and gathered ourselves momentarily. That was when I saw something scrawled on the rock. At first, I felt good because I thought vandalism equals civilization, and at that point, civilization was the priority. But after I pointed it out to Jeff and began sweeping it off, he said to me, "If we run into people out here, it could be bad. We need to get moving." Jeff stood up as I finished brushing off the image. It was only a drawing with an arrow above it. The drawing looked like a flying man with horns, tail, and disproportionately large teeth, and the arrow pointed to a crack in the rock formation, directly in front of us. Well, someone must have been here and survived, so I think we'll be okay, I told Jeff. Jeff came back and took a look at the drawing. I think for a moment we both forgot about the bad turns of the day, and were just fascinated by this image. Something so simple in such an incongruous place. Scary, intriguing, at most. Jeff kept looking at the rock and back at the drawing. Then he looked at me. "How old do you think it is? The drawing?" he asked me. "Man, I don't know. It's hard to tell. It looks like old staining the scratches of the rock. There's no telling how you could even know," I started. "But somebody spent some time chipping it in there," I finished. I took several pictures of it, along with shots of the immediate rock formations. The image was scratched into a flat, exposed portion of a very large rock layer, so it was not something we could just pick up and take back with us. We probably would not have anyway, because we learned not to disturb places we would venture into, but it would have been tempting because it was surreal, and something I did not want to leave to a portion of the desert that I would probably not be able to ever locate again. But I did immediately try to deduce how I marked the area by the best means I could without the GPS. Sort of a substitute, high-tech bread crumble trail. As all of this was going through my head, Jeff just asked, "What do you think? Should we?" as he nodded at the stone crevice. I was surprised. He was recently visibly panicked, but now felt, as did I, that we had suddenly found the purpose of wandering lost in the Sonoran, to see what was in that hole. "Fuck it," I said. "Let's do it." And we started walking towards the cave. "I gotta know what's in there." "Yeah, what is in there?" Jeff smiled, and we started stumbling over the rough surface toward the countersunk crevice opening. We were lapping it up just as we both began crouching into all four positions to descend. Then we heard a chilling sound. A cackle. A true-to-true life cackle. From a hole in the deep desert earth. We heard it echo up from the deep down inside that dark slit. We both stopped and sat down. We listened. "Wow," Jeff said, moving his jaw back and forth in consideration. "That sounds like something is alive down there," I whispered. "Yeah," Jeff agreed and then peeked over the edge and waited. We took a look around. The sky was starting to turn orange. Then we heard the sound below us again. This time much of the echo was gone, and the sound was much louder. Whatever it was, it had moved closer to the opening, and the cackle now became a scraping sound, as though the rake was being drawn across the fence. We both jumped up. "We are not prepared for this," Jeff said. I agreed. We immediately began walking quickly north. We walked and ran, jogged and ran, fast walked and sprinted, climbed and stumbled. The whole time we were looking back and squinting. A couple times I thought I saw something, as did Jeff, but really, I believe it was just fear. As the sun met the horizon, our phone signal came back as we neared the 2 East. We called Edgar, and he picked us up about an hour and a half later. I don't know what lived in that hole, but whatever it is, I think it selected that particular place for a reason. We were probably part of only a handful of humans who had ever wandered there in the past century. Kudos to you, flying man. Story 6. I am Navajo. My grandfather was an elder with the Navajo Nation. The res extends through 3 states, as they say. I lived with my uncle in Arizona, that area of reservation. I worked at one of the places he had in the south, near Flagstaff. I guess the best part of my working for my uncle was the interaction I had with outsiders. Some of the tourists were distasteful idiots, but the good people made it worth it. Probably about the way life goes. The desert is a pretty bleak place, but when it is the only thing you know, you get to know it well, and you begin to fear everything else. When I was in my later teens, I ventured off the res. I looked up a distant cousin, Mai. He lived south of Phoenix, closer to Tucson. He was so happy to see me. I was happy that he was happy. His mother lived in a trailer, and she was not happy to see me. But I did not take it personally because she was not happy to see anyone. It's funny because my cousin was years off the res, but seemed much more dedicated to tradition than me. Maybe because he romanticized it, while I was still feeling the reality of it. But he would use terms that I did not even know. He asked if I would help him with the sin for his mom. Then he explains that she needs a post put in her driveway. I asked him if he loved the res so much that why did he leave? He said it was not his choice, and we got into this whole thing about his dad. The conversation was something that dragged on, so we went on to something else. I asked him about his school. He said it was good. I asked him what they called him. He told me, Mai. I was surprised. He never denied anything about his heritage. He even maintained a tiny little pathetic line of hair on his lip, true to his Navajo name, Coyote, and in human form he looked like a man with a mustache. But Mai was given his name because his mother said he was clever about being born when he wanted to be born, on his own schedule, and always finding a clever means to get what he wanted as a baby. As he got older, his father told him his name suited him because Mai had a power only known to him. A power to get what he wanted by getting you to laugh with him until it was too late to realize what he was up to. That is how we started talking about the old legends and so forth. Really, I expected more, But when I got to their place, I may as well have been back on the res, because Mai was much more into the old ways than me, and they lived in such a skeletal poor place. The only thing to do was go to the nearby gas station and eat slim beef jerky, watch local TV, or hike the desert. Not much of a departure from the res. After 2 days, I was ready to go back. I loved Mai very much, but I was just getting bored. I think I expected a different world, but I just got more of the same. Bored. Boring. Then Mai asked me about our grandfather. I told him, he's as old as the rocks. He responded with, I saw the waiting devil. Oh no, not that, I told him. It is true, cousin, he calmly said. Mai then shared with me how he saw the waiting devil one night. It made me laugh because it was such a story that our grandfather always told with much passion. And now, here was Mai living it out for him. Why? I asked him. Why did you never bust out and go to Phoenix or Tucson? He just ignored me. You know, we don't have a lot to do out here, cousin, he told me. Really, I hadn't noticed, I smarted back to him. I remember the story about the desert here he told us. I remember he warned my mother before he left. He looked at me. He was right, cousin. It's not just a metaphor or a legend. It's real. I walked away from him at the time. We had been sitting in his mom's trailer eating stale pretzels, and I was just tired of it. So I walked down to the gas station and pulled some coins to get a Pepsi and some Lays. By the time I had wandered back, Mai had even gotten out of his chair. The first thing he said to me was, I could show you where it lives. After some heated arguing and awkward apologies, I made myself excited to go trekking with him in a part of the desert rocks, there to see this thing our grandfather calls the waiting devil. By the time the sun went down, I was even feeling guilty that I had been so combative with my cousin. He was letting me stay there for free and never asked anything of me. Yeah, I thought, maybe this will be fun. Around 10 p.m., and we had already drank the 6-pack of Budweiser his mother brought home from her job. We were laughing and making fun of our family, trying to find our own way through ignorance on a path of arrogance. About an hour later, we were in the desert under moonlight. We had been walking in the sand, which gets old real fast. Then we end up on flat rock and walk some more. When? I demanded. Soon, he whispered back. It is worth it. Then we are in a valley, and then a crevice, then a cave, and the smell was so overwhelming. Bat shit, I told him. I know that smell very well. I hope you did not bring me out on a moonlit walk to see bats. I can see bats every day of the week back on the res, I grumbled. Then we reach a clearing over a plateau. It was beautiful in the moonlight, even for someone who grew up in the desert. What a view. Then Mai opens his backpack and throws me a beer. Okay, now I feel better, I laughed. We started talking about girls at his school. I told him maybe I would move to Phoenix and go to college there someday on scholarship. I had heard about. Then he gets all old world on me. I came here, to this place a few years ago, to kill myself. I got drunk. I scored some drugs. I laid down. He stopped. He drank. He waited, and then spoke in a whisper. Then I saw it. Then he looked at me. I saw it. Why? I started. It always has to go underground with you? He said, Look, you see it there? I was half laughing when I looked up to one of the far-away red rocks towering in the night sky, and I saw it. I saw a man-dragon flying in the distance, over the empty desert. I remember I sat up and I stared. The waiting devil, he said, then took a drink of beer. I told you, cousin. He was silent. You still think they are all dumb stories? I started asking him all kinds of questions, but I mostly remember wanting to know, how did you know it was here? Yeah, he said casually. I've only seen it now in October, at around this time. As the waiting devil disappeared into the rocks, he explained, "It was October when I first saw it. That sad, sad night. And even though I looked for it at other times, I never saw it at any other time. Only that next year. The same month, October. I don't know why. It was unreal to watch that thing our grandfather had always talked about. But there it was, landing on the face of the red rock and crawling into a crack on the side. No one will bother it there. It knows that. This is protected land, cousin." He drank some more. And who would ever believe anything anyone says when they live in a trailer? "Or on the res," I agreed. He was right. He was telling us straight, cousin. He stared. "The waiting devil lives in the rocks of the desert sunset." Yeah, he was right. I nodded. I moved to Phoenix that next year. Mai and his mother moved to Texas a few months after that. I was never able to find that spot where he took me again, though I tried in vain twice. Maybe some things are best left unable to find forever.